Iron Horizon, a post-apocalyptic tale or survival. Please take a moment to share this story with a friend. Thank you. Chapter 1. The Job. What used to be called America, the year 2047. The Tennessee sun was an angry god. Its rays bounced off the cracked asphalt, rippling heat like a mirage, even though Jax Miller knew better. Mirages were hopeful illusions. Out here, hope got you killed. Jax squinted at the group clustered beneath a makeshift awning of frayed tarps. Refugees, men, women, and a couple of kids. They weren't the first desperate souls he'd seen, and they wouldn't be the last. The woman at the front, Amelia, had that hardened look, the kind that came from shouldering other people's survival for too long. Her younger brother Lucas fidgeted beside her, his dirty hands gripping a slingshot like it might actually do some good. Jax crossed his arms, leaning against his dirt-caked motorcycle. He didn't bother taking off the sunglasses shielding his eyes from the harsh light. I told the old man I wasn't running a daycare. Amelia stepped forward, chin high. We're not asking for babysitting, just protection. There's 15 of us, and we can pay. 15's a herd, Jax muttered. You'll be raider bait within 2 days. We've lasted this long, she shot back. Barely. Jax let his gaze drift over the group. Hollow cheeks, sunburnt skin, and a cart piled with meager supplies. If they'd survived this long, it was either dumb luck or Amelia's sheer willpower. A voice rasped from the back of the group. You're not as tough as you act, Miller. Jax stiffened. The voice belonged to Simon, the old man who'd tracked him down for this job. Simon stepped forward, leaning on a staff that looked sturdy enough to crack skulls. His gray hair stuck out in wild tufts, and his sunken eyes gleamed with something Jax didn't trust. Hope, maybe. Don't start, Simon, Jax said. You're lucky I even came to hear your pitch. You'll come because you owe me, Simon replied, his tone calm but firm, and because these people don't stand a chance without you. Jax's jaw tightened. Simon had always known which buttons to push. He glanced back at Amelia. She held his gaze unflinching. Where are you headed? The Iron Horizon, she said. Jax snorted. Cute name. What is it, some hippie commune with water filters and veggie gardens? It's real, Amelia said, her voice steady. It's west of the old Mississippi. Simon says a lot of things, Jax interrupted, shooting the old man a glare. Most of it's crap. Amelia didn't flinch. Are you in or not? Jax glanced back at his bike, considering. He'd been running solo for years, and that suited him fine. But the way Simon looked at him stirred something he didn't like, a pull toward responsibility to people. He hated that feeling. How much? Jax asked finally. Enough, Amelia said. Food, water, and whatever credits we've got left. Not enough, Jax said. My price is high. You don't have it. Simon shuffled closer. We don't, but we've got something better. Jax raised an eyebrow. This should be good. The old man reached into his coat and pulled out a small vial. It caught the sunlight, the liquid inside a deep crystalline blue. Water. Pure, clean water, untouched by the filtration hacks that kept most people alive. Jax stared at it longer than he meant to. From the horizon, Simon said softly. If you help us, there's more where that came from. Jax exhaled sharply, dragging his gaze back to the old man. You don't even know if it's real. Just another mirage, Simon. Maybe, Simon said. But if it is, we can't get there without you. Jax weighed the vial in his mind against the long, brutal road west. Raiders, corporate mercenaries, and the unrelenting sun. A bad bet. Still, the possibility of a payoff gnawed at him. Fine, he said at last. But if anyone slows me down, they're on their own. Got it? Amelia didn't blink. Got it. Good, Jax said. Let's move before I change my mind. The group stirred into action, gathering their supplies and hitching their cart to a pair of half-dead mules. Jax turned to his bike, running a hand over its battered frame. He'd survive this. He always did. But something about these people, about their desperate belief in a place that probably didn't exist, made his gut churn. As the caravan lurched forward, Jax mounted his bike and kicked it to life. The engine roared, loud enough to drown out his doubts. He took his place at the front, scanning the horizon where heat shimmered and danger waited. By nightfall, the first raiders had found them. Chapter 2. Blood in the Sand. The first sign was the dust cloud. Jax saw it from a mile off, a faint plume rising against the blood-orange sky. The caravan trudged along in oblivious silence, too tired to notice the threat bearing down on them. "Hold up!" Jax called, his voice sharp over the rumble of his idling bike. Amelia stopped the cart, squinting into the distance. "What is it?" Jax pointed toward the dust cloud. "Trouble. Raiders, maybe worse." The refugees froze, their fear palpable. Lucas tugged at Amelia's sleeve, whispering something Jax didn't catch. Amelia brushed him off and stepped toward Jax. "How many?" "Too many," Jax said, dismounting his bike. His boots crunched against the parched dirt as he strode back to the caravan. "Circle up! Get the women and kids inside the wagons! Anyone who can fight, grab a weapon!" A few of the refugees shuffled to obey, though most looked like they wanted to bolt. Jax grabbed a rifle from his saddlebag and slung it over his shoulder. "Amelia, you stay with the wagons." Her eyes flared. "The hell I will." Jax rounded on her. "You're the leader, right? Then lead. Keep these people calm and leave the fighting to me." Amelia clenched her jaw but didn't argue. She turned to Lucas, shoving him toward the cart. "Stay with the others." Lucas started to protest, but a look from Jax shut him up. The kid stomped off, muttering under his breath. Jax scanned the terrain, quickly forming a plan. They were in a low valley, the cracked earth stretching out like an old scar. The only cover was a cluster of jagged boulders to the west, but it would have to do. "Simon!" Jax barked. The old man hobbled over, gripping his staff. "You've got sharp eyes," Jax said. "Watch our flank. If anyone gets through, make them regret it." Simon smirked, tapping his staff against the ground. "I'll do my best." The dust cloud grew larger, resolving into shapes. 5 trucks, rusty and battered but fast. Raiders, no doubt. Jax cursed under his breath. He'd dealt with their kind before. Greedy, ruthless scavengers who'd kill for a sip of water. He jogged to the boulders and dropped to one knee, bracing his rifle against the rock. The first truck was close enough now for him to see the driver, a wiry man with a jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw. He was grinning. Jax didn't give him the chance to gloat. He squeezed the trigger and the rifle barked, the bullet punching through the truck's windshield. The driver's head snapped back, and the vehicle veered sharply before slamming into the dirt. Chaos erupted. The other trucks roared forward, their passengers yelling and firing wildly. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks, and Jax ducked low, firing in controlled bursts. One truck skidded to a halt as a tire blew, its occupants scrambling for cover. Behind him he heard the refugees shouting, their voices thick with panic. Jax forced himself to focus. If he didn't hold the line, there wouldn't be anyone left to save. Another raider popped into view, his rifle trained on Jax. Too slow. Jax fired first, the man crumpling into the dirt. He adjusted his aim, taking out a third as the remaining trucks circled around, trying to flank him. "Move the wagons!" Jax shouted, his voice cracking over the gunfire. "Get to the boulders!" The caravan lurched into motion, the refugees scrambling to push their carts toward cover. Amelia fired a pistol from the rear, her shots wild but enough to keep the raiders at bay. Jax took down another attacker, but there were too many. A truck swerved past him, barreling toward the caravan. He cursed and sprinted after it, yanking his pistol from its holster. He fired at the tires, the first shot missing, but the second hitting home. The truck fishtailed, skidding to a halt mere feet from the lead wagon. The driver leaped out, a machete gleaming in his hand. He charged at Amelia, who raised her pistol with shaking hands. Before she could fire, Jax tackled the man, slamming him into the ground. They wrestled in the dirt, the machete slicing dangerously close to Jax's face. He grabbed the raider's wrist and twisted hard, snapping bone. The man screamed, and Jax ended it with a sharp punch to the temple. Jax stood, breathing hard, as the last of the raiders retreated. 2 trucks sped off into the distance, leaving their dead and wounded behind. The silence that followed was deafening. He turned to the caravan. A few of the refugees were injured, but alive. Amelia knelt beside Lucas, who clutched a makeshift spear, his face pale but determined. "You good?" Jax asked. Amelia looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "We're alive!" Jax nodded, though he knew it wouldn't be the last time they had to fight. He glanced down at the raider's machete, now stained with blood, and slid it into his belt. "We keep moving," he said. "They'll be back, and next time they'll bring more friends." Simon approached, leaning heavily on his staff. He gestured toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set. "You handled yourself well." Jax didn't respond. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and walked back to his bike. The iron horizon had better be worth it, because if it wasn't, this job would kill them all. Chapter 3. Ghosts of the Past. The caravan rolled forward under the oppressive heat, the fight behind them but far from forgotten. Jax kept his bike just ahead of the group, scanning the empty terrain for any sign of movement. The world stretched out flat and barren, as if God had given up halfway through painting the landscape. It made him twitchy. Wide-open spaces were death traps. Behind him, the refugees murmured in hushed tones, dragging the cart through the dirt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The silence between their words was heavier than the air. Jax didn't blame them. They'd just survived a brush with death. For some of them, it might have been the first time. For him, it was just another day. Simon sidled up to him as the caravan paused for a water break. The old man leaned on his staff, his sharp eyes taking in the horizon. "They'll be back, you know." Jax didn't look at him. "I know." "Then why do you stay?" Jax shot him a sidelong glance. "You dragged me into this. Don't act like I volunteered." Simon chuckled, a dry rasping sound. "Maybe you didn't, but you could have walked away." Jax didn't respond. He turned his attention to the horizon where jagged silhouettes rose in the distance. Buildings, maybe, or what was left of them. It wasn't on their route, but the idea of shelter was tempting. "Ghost town up ahead," he said, pointing. "We'll camp there tonight." Amelia overheard and nodded. Good. The people need rest. Jax said nothing. Rest was a luxury he hadn't indulged in for years. The ghost town was a husk of its former self. Broken windows gaped like empty eyes, and the once colorful signs above the shops were faded and peeling. The group entered cautiously, pushing the cart down the main street while Jax scouted ahead. The only sound was the groan of the wind through the shattered buildings. "Stay close," Jax said, motioning them to stop near what used to be a diner. "We'll set up here." Amelia and Simon began organizing the group while Jax explored the surrounding buildings. Most were gutted, their contents looted long ago, but he found a few useful items: a rusted crowbar, a box of matches, and half a bottle of whiskey that smelled more like nail polish remover. He pocketed it anyway. As he walked back to the diner, he caught sight of Lucas sitting on the steps of an old hardware store, clutching his slingshot. The kid looked up as Jax approached, his face smeared with dirt, but his eyes steady. "You ever use that thing?" Jax asked, nodding at the slingshot. Lucas shrugged. "A little. It's not much, but it's better than nothing." "Better than nothing will still get you killed," Jax said. He reached into his belt and pulled out the machete he'd taken from the raider. "Here, if you're gonna fight, do it right." Lucas hesitated, then took the blade. It was almost too big for him to wield, but he gripped it tightly. "Thanks." "Don't thank me," Jax said. "Just don't hesitate if you need to use it." Lucas nodded, his expression hardening. For a moment, Jax saw himself in the boy's determined eyes, and it sent a pang through his chest. He pushed the thought aside and headed back to the group. The refugees built a fire in the middle of the street, the orange glow casting long shadows against the crumbling walls. They ate in silence, rationing what little food they had left. Jax sat apart, sipping from the whiskey bottle and keeping watch. He didn't like staying in one place for too long. Ghost towns were called that for a reason. Sometimes the ghosts wore flesh and carried guns. Amelia broke the silence, sitting down beside him without asking. "You always keep to yourself?" "People are messy," Jax said, not looking at her. "Easier this way." She studied him for a moment. "You weren't always like this." He smirked. "You think you've got me figured out?" "No, but I've seen the way you look at Lucas. You care, even if you don't want to." Jax stiffened, his smirk vanishing. "Kid reminds me of someone, that's all." "Who?" she pressed. He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the dying fire. Memories flickered at the edges of his mind. Faces, voices, blood. He forced them down. Nobody who matters anymore. Amelia didn't push. She sat quietly for a moment, then stood. You're good at what you do, Jax. But don't let the past kill you before the raiders do. She walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Night fell, and the town sank into darkness. Jax stayed awake, patrolling the perimeter with his rifle at the ready. The shadows felt too thick, too alive. He didn't trust them. Around midnight he heard a sound, soft, distant, like the scrape of metal on metal. He froze, every muscle tensed. Slowly he moved toward the edge of the town where the sound had come from. A figure stepped out of the shadows and Jax raised his rifle. "Stop right there!" The figure froze, hands raised. It was a young man, no older than 20, his face gaunt and his clothes filthy. "Please," he rasped, "I don't want trouble." "Too late," Jax said, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Who are you?" I got separated from my group," the man stammered. "I just need water. Please." Jax's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe in coincidences. "You alone?" The man nodded, but his shifty eyes gave him away. Jax's gut twisted. He'd seen this play before. The first bullet whizzed past his head, and Jax dove for cover, cursing. A second figure appeared, then a third, both armed and grinning like wolves. Raiders, of course. Jax fired back, dropping one of them with a clean shot to the chest. The young man who had played decoy bolted into the night, leaving his comrades behind. The other raider returned fire, pinning Jax behind a crumbling wall. The sound of gunfire woke the caravan. Shouts erupted as Amelia and Simon rallied the refugees, dragging them toward the diner for cover. Jax gritted his teeth and returned fire, his shots forcing the remaining raider to retreat. By the time the dust settled, the raiders were gone, but Jax knew it wasn't over. They were scouting, testing the waters. The real attack would come soon. He walked back to the group, his rifle slung over his shoulder. Amelia met him with a look of grim determination. "What now?" Jax glanced at Lucas, who still clutched the machete like a lifeline, then at Simon, whose eyes were dark with unspoken worry. "Now," Jax said, "we get the hell out of here, before the ghosts come back with friends." Chapter 4. The Chase. Dawn spilled across the horizon, casting a pale orange glow over the ghost town. The caravan was already moving, every person on edge after the midnight skirmish. Jax rode ahead on his bike, scanning the horizon. His instincts screamed at him to pick up the pace. The raiders weren't done. They'd only been testing them. "Move faster," Jax called over his shoulder. The wagon wheels groaned against the hard-packed dirt as the refugees pushed with all their strength. Amelia jogged alongside the cart, her face flushed and determined. Simon trudged behind, muttering under his breath about the stupidity of traveling during the day. Lucas struggled to keep up, his slingshot and machete banging against his side. "How much further?" he asked, panting. "Doesn't matter," Jax snapped. "Just keep moving." He wasn't lying to the kid. The real question wasn't how far they had to go, but how far they could make it before the raiders caught up. By mid-morning, the sun was a hammer pounding on their backs. The cracked earth radiated heat, and the caravan slowed to a crawl. Jax clenched his teeth. He wanted to push them harder, but the refugees were already at their limit. They needed water, shade, neither of which existed out here. Amelia caught up to him, her voice low and urgent. "We can't keep this pace. They'll collapse." "They collapse. They die," Jax replied, keeping his eyes on the horizon. "Same as if we stop." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "You've got to give them a break." Jax yanked his arm free. "You think the raiders are stopping for a coffee break? They'll catch up, and when they do, your brother's first on the chopping block." Amelia's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She fell back into the group, rallying the others to keep moving. Jax hated how much sense his words made. He hated even more that they were true. The dust cloud appeared just after noon. Jax saw it first, a thin smear rising on the eastern horizon. His stomach clenched. The raiders were coming, and this time they weren't playing games. "Move!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the caravan's groans. "Double time!" The refugees tried to pick up the pace, but their exhaustion was written in every step. Jax cursed under his breath, his mind racing. They wouldn't outrun the trucks on foot, not like this. His eyes darted across the barren landscape, searching for an escape. That's when he saw it, a jagged canyon cutting through the earth to the west. Its walls were steep, but it offered cover, a chance to even the odds. "This way!" Jax barked, swerving his bike toward the canyon. The refugees hesitated, glancing at Amelia. "Go!" she shouted. "Do what he says!" The group turned, dragging the cart toward the canyon as fast as their legs could carry them. Behind them, the raiders' engines roared, the trucks closing the distance. The canyon was a narrow, winding path flanked by sharp walls of red rock. Jax dismounted his bike, leading it alongside the wagon. The sound of the raiders' engines echoed through the canyon like thunder. "Keep going," Jax ordered. "Don't stop." The refugees pushed forward, their breaths ragged. Jax fell back, his rifle ready. He counted 3 trucks barreling toward them, dust and gravel flying in their wake. The raiders had weapons, shotguns, rifles, and the kind of makeshift armor that came from scavenging the dead. "Simon, take the left wall," Jax shouted. The old man climbed a ledge, his staff in one hand and a scavenged pistol in the other. Jax crouched behind a boulder, aiming his rifle at the lead truck. He took a deep breath and squeezed the trigger. The bullet punched through the windshield, sending the driver slumping over the wheel. The truck veered off course, slamming into the canyon wall. The second truck swerved around the wreckage, its passengers leaning out the windows to fire. Jax ducked as bullets ricocheted off the rocks. He popped up and fired again, hitting a raider in the chest. The man tumbled from the truck, disappearing beneath its wheels. Simon fired from his perch, his shots wild but effective enough to keep the raiders off balance. The third truck slowed, its driver cautious after seeing the wreckage ahead. "Amelia!" Jax yelled. "Get the cart through the narrow pass." She nodded, rallying the refugees to push harder. Lucas stayed close to her, gripping his machete with trembling hands. Jax caught the boy's eye and gave him a sharp nod. "Stay strong." The second truck skidded to a stop and the raiders jumped out, their boots crunching against the gravel. There were 6 of them, armed with everything from crowbars to automatic rifles. Jax cursed. Too many. He fired, dropping one, but the others spread out, taking cover behind the wreckage. One of them lobbed a Molotov cocktail, the flaming bottle smashing against the canyon wall. Heat and smoke billowed out, stinging Jax's eyes. "Simon, get down!" Jax shouted as another raider took aim at the old man. Simon ducked just in time, the bullets sparking off the rock behind him. The raiders advanced, their shouts growing louder. Jax gritted his teeth, switching to his pistol as his rifle ran dry. He fired twice, hitting one in the leg and another in the shoulder. But they kept coming. A sudden scream cut through the chaos. Jax turned to see one of the raiders dragging Lucas away from the cart. The boy struggled, swinging his machete wildly, but the raider was too strong. "Lucas!" Amelia screamed, breaking from the group to chase after him. "Damn it!" Jax growled. He sprinted toward them, his boots slipping on the gravel. The raider raised his weapon, a rusty pipe, ready to strike the boy down. Jax didn't hesitate. He tackled the raider, driving him into the ground. The man swung the pipe, catching Jax on the side of the head. Stars exploded in Jax's vision, but he didn't let go. He grabbed a rock and smashed it into the raider's temple, ending the fight. "Are you okay?" Jax asked Lucas, dragging himself to his feet. Lucas nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Yeah, thanks." Jax handed the boy his machete. "Keep it tight. Don't let anyone take it again." Lucas swallowed hard and nodded. Jax turned to Amelia, who was panting but unharmed. "Get back to the cart." She didn't argue, dragging Lucas back toward the others. Jax turned his attention to the remaining raiders. They hesitated, their numbers dwindling. Jax raised his pistol and fired one last shot, sending the survivors scrambling back to their truck. They peeled out, leaving the canyon in a cloud of dust. When the dust settled, Jax leaned against a boulder, his chest heaving. The refugees stared at him in stunned silence. He pushed himself upright, scanning the group for injuries. A few cuts and bruises, but everyone was alive. "We can't stay here," Jax said, his voice hoarse. "They'll regroup." Amelia stepped forward, her face grim but determined. "Where do we go?" Jax looked west toward the endless expanse of desert. The iron horizon felt impossibly far, but it was their only chance. "Forward," he said. "Always forward." Without waiting for a response, he mounted his bike and rode ahead, the engine's growl the only sound in the canyon. Chapter 5. The Betrayal. The caravan slogged through the night, the moonlight casting an eerie glow over the cracked earth. Jax kept his bike at the front, the engine rumbling low as he scouted ahead. The canyon was long behind them, and with it the immediate threat of the raiders. But he knew better than to feel safe. Raiders weren't the only predators out here. Amelia walked beside the cart, her face set in a mask of exhaustion. The refugees were beyond tired, their steps faltering, but Jax hadn't called for a stop. Every hour they gained was an hour the raiders spent trying to catch up. He wasn't about to waste it. Lucas stumbled, catching himself on the side of the cart. "Can we rest soon?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet," Amelia said, glancing toward Jax. "How much further?" "There's a dry riverbed a few miles ahead," Jax replied without looking back. "We'll stop there." Amelia nodded, though her expression said she wasn't thrilled with the plan. She wasn't the only one. The murmurs among the refugees were growing louder, their frustration bubbling just below the surface. Jax ignored them. They could grumble all they wanted as long as they kept moving. The riverbed was a shallow depression in the earth, its banks littered with rocks and the brittle remains of long-dead trees. Jax dismounted his bike and motioned for the group to circle the wagons. "Keep the fire small," he said. "We don't want to be seen." Amelia began organizing the refugees, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Lucas helped gather dry wood, his machete slung across his back. Simon leaned against his staff, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. Jax walked the perimeter, checking for signs of movement. The riverbed offered some cover, but it wasn't ideal. He'd have preferred higher ground, but the refugees couldn't go another mile without collapsing. He pulled his rifle off his shoulder and sat on a boulder overlooking the camp, his eyes never resting. The fire crackled quietly as the refugees huddled around it, eating their meager rations. Jax stayed apart, chewing on a piece of dried meat as he watched the group. He didn't trust them. Trust was a liability. Amelia approached, her arms crossed. "You planning to sit up there all night?" "Someone has to," Jax said. Her gaze was steady, unyielding. "You think they're going to turn on you?" "I don't think." "I know." Amelia sighed, dropping her voice. "They're scared, Jax. They've lost everything. If they seem angry, it's because they don't know what else to feel." Jax didn't answer. He'd seen fear turn into desperation, and desperation made people dangerous. He wasn't about to let his guard down, no matter what sob story Amelia spun. She shook her head and turned to leave. "Suit yourself." The attack came just before dawn. Jax woke to the sound of footsteps crunching against the gravel. He rolled off his makeshift bed, grabbing his rifle. The fire had burned low, and the camp was shrouded in shadows. He crept toward the sound, his boots silent against the ground. A figure moved near the wagons, hunched low. Jax raised his rifle. "Don't move." The figure froze, then slowly turned. It was a man from the caravan, one of the younger refugees, Danny. His hands were full of supplies, water bottles, food, even a rifle Jax had stashed in the cart. "What the hell are you doing?" Jax growled, stepping closer. Danny's eyes darted around, wild and panicked. I wasn't stealing, I was—" "Spare me," Jax said. "You're running." Danny's face crumpled, the facade breaking. "They're coming for us," he whispered. "I heard them. The raiders. They'll be here by morning. I just wanted to get out before—" "Before you left everyone else to die," Jax finished coldly. Danny took a step back, shaking his head. "I didn't have a choice." "Yeah, you did," Jax said. He grabbed the supplies from Danny's arms and shoved him toward the fire. "Wake them up." "What?" Danny stammered. "You're going to tell everyone what you were planning," Jax said. "Right now." Danny looked like he might bolt, but the steel in Jax's voice left no room for argument. Slowly, he shuffled toward the group. Jax followed, his rifle slung over his shoulder. The camp woke in a flurry of confusion as Danny stammered through his confession. Angry voices rose, cutting through the early morning stillness. Amelia stepped forward, silencing them with a sharp look. "What did you hear?" she asked Danny. "They're close," he said, his voice trembling. "A few hours away, maybe less. They're going to hit us hard." Jax swore under his breath. He'd hoped for more time, but it seemed the raiders were more organized than he'd thought. "We have to move," Amelia said, her voice steady but urgent. "Now!" "No," Jax said firmly. "We can't outrun them. Not like this. What are you suggesting? Simon asked, his tone wary. Jax glanced around the group, weighing his options. We make a stand. Here. The refugees erupted into protests, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. Jax ignored them, looking directly at Amelia. We've got the cart for cover and a choke point at the riverbed. It's our best shot. It's suicide, someone muttered. Jax turned, his gaze sharp. It's survival. You run, you die tired. We fight, we've got a chance. Amelia nodded slowly, though her face was pale. All right, we fight. The camp erupted into action, everyone scrambling to prepare. Jax directed them with military precision, setting up barricades with the carts and positioning the refugees where they'd have the most cover. Simon, you take the high ground again, Jax said. Keep them pinned down. The old man nodded, his face grim. I'll do what I can. Jax turned to Lucas, who clutched his machete with white knuckles. You stick with Amelia. Keep her safe. Lucas swallowed hard but nodded. I will. The sun rose slowly, its light creeping across the riverbed. In the distance, the low rumble of engines echoed, growing louder with every passing second. Jax gripped his rifle, his jaw tight. Here they come, he muttered. The raiders appeared on the horizon, their trucks kicking up clouds of dust. Jax raised his rifle and took aim, his finger steady on the trigger. Hold the line, he called out, his voice cutting through the tension. No one runs. Not this time. The first shot rang out, splitting the morning air. The battle for survival had begun. Chapter 6. The Truth of the Horizon. The battle was chaos. Jax's rifle roared, the sharp crack of gunfire blending with the screams of the raiders and the panicked cries of the refugees. The raiders hit the camp hard, but Jax had chosen the choke point well. The narrow riverbed forced the attackers into a bottleneck, limiting their ability to flank. Still, they came in waves, reckless and feral. Jax dropped behind the barricade of carts, slamming a fresh magazine into his rifle. Simon, give me some cover fire. Up on the ridge, Simon fired his pistol, each shot scattering the raiders below. He wasn't a marksman, but his position gave him an advantage. The old man was calm under pressure, his aim steady despite his age. Amelia and Lucas were huddled near the wagon, the boy clutching his machete like a lifeline. Jax caught Amelia's eye and shouted, Keep them back! Don't let them get around us! She nodded, firing her pistol into the chaos. It wasn't the first time Jax had seen someone forced into a fight, but she was holding her own better than most. Lucas, to his credit, stayed close, his wide eyes scanning for threats. A raider burst through the smoke, screaming as he charged the barricade. Jax swung his rifle up and fired, the man crumpling mid-stride. He glanced over his shoulder to check the group. Most of the refugees were huddled behind cover, their fear palpable but controlled. The battle stretched on, but slowly the tide began to turn. The raiders were disorganized, their numbers thinning as Jax and the others held their ground. Finally, the last truck peeled away, its passengers firing blindly as they retreated into the distance. Jax didn't relax until the sound of engines faded completely. He stood, his rifle still at the ready, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. It's over, Amelia said, her voice shaky. For now, Jax muttered, lowering his weapon. They'll regroup. The refugees began to emerge from their hiding spots, their faces etched with exhaustion and relief. Lucas staggered toward Jax, his hands trembling as he held the machete. You did good, kid, Jax said, clapping him on the shoulder. Now, go help your sister. Lucas nodded, his steps unsteady as he made his way to Amelia. Jax turned to Simon, who was making his way down from the ridge, his staff tapping against the rocks. Well, Simon asked. What now? Jax's lips tightened into a grim line. We keep moving. This was a warning. Next time they'll hit us harder. The caravan pushed forward, leaving the battle-scarred riverbed behind. The refugees moved in grim silence, the adrenaline of the fight replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. Jax rode at the front, his eyes scanning the horizon. The terrain had begun to shift, less open desert, more rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation. It wasn't much, but it was a sign they were getting closer to their destination. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Simon approached Jax, his staff tapping against the ground. We need to talk. Not now, Jax said, his voice curt. Yes, now, Simon replied, his tone firm. The people are tired, scared. They need to know what they're fighting for. Jax sighed, pulling his bike to a stop. He dismounted and turned to face the old man. You want to give them a pep talk? Be my guest. Just don't expect me to hold their hands. Simon shook his head. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about you. What about me? Jax asked, folding his arms. You've been leading them, keeping them alive, but you don't believe in the Iron Horizon, Simon said, his eyes piercing. You think it's just a story. Because it is, Jax snapped. Some pipe dream you sold these people to keep them moving. Simon's expression didn't waver. It's real, Jax, and if we get there, it could change everything. Jax snorted. Yeah? What makes you so sure? Simon hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. Because I helped build it. Jax's stomach dropped. What? Simon looked up, his face shadowed by the setting sun. Years ago, before the collapse, I worked for a research group. The Iron Horizon was a project, a self-sustaining facility with advanced water purification systems. It was supposed to be a lifeline for the elite, a place they could retreat to if things ever got this bad. And you just forgot to mention this before now? Jax growled. I wasn't sure it still existed, Simon admitted. But when I saw the reports, the rumors, I knew it was worth the risk. Jax stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You dragged me into this on a hunch? It's more than a hunch, Simon said. If we can get there, it's not just water. It's hope, a chance to rebuild. Jax stared at him, his fists clenched. He wanted to walk away, to leave the old man to his delusions, but a small part of him, buried deep, wanted to believe Simon was telling the truth. You better be right, Jax said finally, because if you're not, I'm done, and so are they. That night the caravan camped in a narrow gorge, the walls offering some protection from the open desert. The refugees huddled together, their whispers carrying on the wind. Jax sat apart from the group, his back against a rock as he cleaned his rifle. Amelia approached, sitting down beside him without asking. She didn't speak at first, staring out at the flickering firelight. Simon told me about the Iron Horizon, she said eventually. Yeah? Jax replied without looking at her. What do you think? I think he believes it's real, she said. And I think you're starting to believe it too. Jax glanced at her, his expression unreadable. I believe in surviving. That's it. Amelia didn't push. Instead, she leaned back, her voice soft. We're going to make it, Jax. All of us. You'll see. Jax didn't respond. He stared out into the darkness, his thoughts swirling. He wanted to believe her, to believe Simon, but belief was dangerous. Belief got people killed. Still, as the night stretched on, he found himself wondering, what if the Iron Horizon was real? What if it wasn't just a story? And for the first time in years, Jax let himself hope. Chapter 7. The Last Stand. The Iron Horizon loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the blazing midday sun. Jax had seen plenty of pre-collapse structures in his time, but this one was different. Towering steel walls rose from the barren earth, encircling what looked like a massive dome. The air shimmered with heat waves, giving the structure an almost surreal quality. That's it, Simon said, his voice cracking with emotion. We made it. Amelia moved closer, her face lit with cautious hope. Are you sure? It doesn't look active. Jax scanned the horizon with narrowed eyes. It's active. Look at the walls. No dust buildup. Someone's been maintaining it. Lucas perked up. So there are people inside? Maybe, Jax said. But we're not the only ones interested in getting in. He pointed behind them, where a familiar dust cloud was rising fast. The raiders had found them. The caravan pushed forward, desperation lending strength to their weary limbs. Jax rode alongside the group, his rifle slung across his back. The closer they got to the Iron Horizon, the clearer the danger became. The raiders were coming in force. 3 trucks, at least a dozen armed men. The roar of their engines echoed like a death knell. Amelia grabbed Jax's arm as they jogged beside the cart. We can't fight them out in the open. We won't, Jax said. We use the walls. What if the doors don't open? Lucas asked, his voice trembling. "They'll open," Simon said, though his expression betrayed his doubt. "The facility recognizes authorized personnel. It'll let us in." Jax shot him a look. "And if it doesn't?" Simon didn't answer. They reached the base of the Iron Horizon just as the raiders came into firing range. Bullets ricocheted off the steel walls, forcing the group to huddle closer to the structure for cover. Jax scanned the towering gate, a seamless slab of metal with no visible controls. "Simon!" Jax barked. "Get this thing open!" Simon hurried to the gate, pulling a small device from his coat. It looked like a pre-collapse scanner, its screen cracked but functional. He held it against the wall, muttering to himself as he punched in a series of codes. "Hurry up!" Amelia shouted, firing her pistol at the approaching raiders. Her shots were wild, but they kept the attackers cautious. Jax turned to the refugees. "Barricade the wagon. Use it as cover and hold them off as long as you can." Lucas grabbed his machete, standing beside Amelia with a determined expression. "I'll help." "No," Jax said sharply. "Stick to cover and keep your sister safe." "I can fight!" Lucas protested. "Not now, kid," Jax growled. "You want to help? Stay alive." Lucas hesitated but nodded, retreating to the makeshift barricade. The raiders closed in, their trucks skidding to a halt just out of range. They poured out, a chaotic mix of weapons and makeshift armor, shouting taunts as they advanced. Jax took aim and fired, dropping the first man who stepped too close. "Stay behind the barricade," he called out to the refugees. "Don't give them an easy target." The battle erupted in earnest, gunfire echoing off the steel walls. Jax moved with precision, picking off raiders while keeping the group's position intact. Amelia fired beside him, her movements quick but panicked. She wasn't a soldier, but she was learning fast. Simon was still at the gate, his hands shaking as he worked. "It's not responding," he shouted over the noise. "Keep trying," Jax snapped. A raider climbed onto the wagon, swinging a crowbar toward Lucas. The boy screamed, but before Jax could react, Lucas raised his machete and slashed wildly. The raider fell back, clutching his side. "Nice work, kid," Jax called, though there was no time for relief. The raiders began to flank, their numbers pressing the group into a tighter formation. Jax realized they wouldn't last much longer. He ducked behind the wagon, reloading his rifle with shaking hands. Amelia crouched beside him, her face pale. "This is it, isn't it?" she asked. "Not yet," Jax said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. Suddenly a low hum filled the air. Jax looked up to see the gate shudder, a faint line of light appearing along its edges. Simon stumbled back, his face lit with triumph. "It's opening!" The gate split down the middle, the two halves sliding apart to reveal a dark interior. Cool air wafted out, carrying the faint scent of machinery and something else, water. "Inside!" Jax shouted. "Everyone inside!" The refugees scrambled toward the opening, dragging the cart with them. Jax and Amelia held their ground, covering their retreat with a barrage of gunfire. Lucas stayed close to his sister, his machete ready. The raiders hesitated, their advance slowing as the gate continued to open. Jax didn't wait to see their next move. He grabbed Amelia's arm and pulled her toward the entrance. "Go! I'll cover you!" She resisted for a moment, then nodded, dragging Lucas with her. Jax was the last to enter, his rifle blazing until the last possible second. As soon as he crossed the threshold, Simon hit a panel on the wall and the gate began to close. The raiders shouted in frustration, their final shots sparking against the steel. When the gate sealed shut, silence fell. The group stood in the dimly lit corridor, their breaths ragged. The sound of dripping water echoed faintly, a promise of what lay ahead. Simon turned to the group, his face a mixture of relief and pride. "Welcome to the Iron Horizon." The corridor led to a massive central chamber, its walls lined with rows of humming machinery. In the center stood a towering pillar of glass, filled with crystal-clear water that flowed endlessly from a hidden source. The refugees stared in awe, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "It's real," Amelia whispered. Simon nodded, tears streaming down his face. "It's real." Jax leaned against the wall, his rifle hanging loosely at his side. The weight of the fight and the journey pressed down on him, but he couldn't deny the sight before him. The Iron Horizon was everything Simon had promised, and more. But as the group celebrated, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that their fight wasn't over. The raiders knew where they were now, and the Iron Horizon wouldn't stay a secret for long. For the moment, though, they were alive, and for Jax, that was enough. "Enjoy it while you can," he muttered, his gaze fixed on the towering pillar of water. "It's only going to get harder from here." Chapter 8. Into the Horizon. The silence inside the Iron Horizon was deafening after the chaos of the battle. The refugees wandered in awe, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous chamber. The central pillar of water drew everyone's attention, a continuous flow cascading down into a massive reservoir. It was a sight none of them had seen in years, pure, clean water, endless and free. Jax stayed near the entrance, his back against the steel wall, rifle slung over his shoulder. His eyes never left the refugees as they approached the water cautiously, some dropping to their knees in disbelief. Amelia knelt by the reservoir, cupping the water in her hands. She took a sip, her face lighting up as if it were the first drink she'd ever had. "It's real," she said, her voice breaking. "It's real." Simon stood nearby, leaning on his staff as he watched the group drink and fill their containers. "I told you," he said, his tone softer than usual. Jax pushed off the wall, his expression grim. "Save the victory dance. This isn't over." Simon frowned. "The raiders can't get in. The gate." "The gate won't stop them forever," Jax interrupted. "They'll find a way, and when they do, they'll hit us harder than ever." The old man sighed but nodded. "You're right. We'll need to secure the facility." "Yeah," Jax said, scanning the room, starting with figuring out what else is in here. Exploring the facility. The Iron Horizon was bigger than it appeared from the outside. Jax, Amelia, and Simon led a small group of refugees deeper into the structure, leaving Lucas to keep watch near the water reservoir. The corridors were clean but stark, their walls lined with conduits and machinery humming faintly. "Who built this place?" Amelia asked as they walked. "Private contractors," Simon replied, "funded by corporations. It was meant to be a survival hub for the elites, a backup plan if the world went under." Amelia frowned. "So why didn't they use it?" Simon hesitated. "They never finished the plan. When the collapse started, the corporations turned on each other. The facility became an afterthought." Jax glanced at him. "But someone's been maintaining it. This place isn't running on ghosts." As they turned a corner, they entered a control room. Monitors flickered to life, their screens displaying schematics of the facility. Simon moved to the nearest console, his hands trembling as he tapped at the keyboard. "This system is ancient," he muttered, squinting at the interface. "But it's operational." Jax leaned over his shoulder. "What's it telling you?" Simon pointed to a map of the facility. "Water purification is automated, but there's a failsafe built into the system. If the reserves run low, it'll shut down access to non-essential areas." "What counts as non-essential?" Amelia asked. "Everything outside of this chamber," Simon said, "including the gate." Jax cursed. "So we're sitting on a time bomb." "Not necessarily," Simon said. "The reserves are full, but we'll need to maintain the system to keep it that way. And there's this." He tapped another key, and the screen shifted to a log of incoming signals. A red dot blinked in the corner. "What's that?" Amelia asked. "A distress beacon," Simon said grimly. "It's been transmitting for years." Jax felt his stomach sink. "You mean we've been broadcasting our location this whole time?" Simon nodded. "It's likely how the raiders found us." Jax clenched his fists, fighting the urge to yell. "Can you shut it off?" Simon shook his head. "Not from here. The beacon's located in the upper levels." "Then we shut it down," Jax said. "Now." The climb. Jax, Amelia, and Simon made their way to the upper levels of the facility, the corridors becoming narrower and more industrial as they climbed. Pipes hissed softly, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air. As they reached a hatch marked Communication Center, Jax stopped. "Stay back," he said, motioning for Amelia to hang back with Simon. He raised his rifle and nudged the hatch open. The room beyond was small and cluttered with old equipment. In the center stood a console, its screen flashing the same red dot they'd seen in the control room. Jax stepped inside, his eyes scanning for any signs of danger. Satisfied it was clear, he waved the others in. "Simon, shut it off." The old man approached the console, his fingers flying over the keys. The blinking red dot flickered, then disappeared. "It's done," Simon said, exhaling. "Good," Jax said. "Now let's—" A low rumble interrupted him, followed by the sound of machinery grinding to life. The console beeped, displaying a new message. "External activation detected." "What did you do?" Jax barked. Simon shook his head frantically. "Nothing, wait." He stared at the screen, his face draining of color. "Someone's accessing the system from outside." "Raiders?" Amelia asked. "Or worse," Simon said. "The beacon may have drawn someone else's attention." Jax didn't like the sound of that. "Can they open the gate?" "Not without an override," Simon said. "But if they've got the tech, they might try something worse." "What's worse than letting the raiders in?" Amelia asked. Simon hesitated. "They could trigger a system purge, flood the facility to make it unusable." Jax's jaw tightened. "Then we're out of time. We need to secure this place now." Back to the refugees. By the time they returned to the main chamber, the refugees were tense. The water's allure had worn off, replaced by the lingering fear of pursuit. Lucas ran to meet them, his machete still in hand. "What's going on?" he asked. "Trouble," Jax said, glancing at Simon. "But we're handling it." Amelia gathered the group, her voice steady but firm. "We need to secure the facility. Jax and I will take shifts watching the perimeter. Lucas, you're with Simon. Learn everything you can about the systems." Lucas nodded, his eyes wide but determined. As the group dispersed, Jax leaned against the wall, his rifle cradled in his arms. He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on the refugees as they worked to settle in. The Iron Horizon was real, and for the first time in years they had a chance at something more than survival. But the dangers weren't over. They were just beginning. Jax's grip tightened on his rifle as he whispered to himself, "Let them come." Chapter 9. Redemption and Sacrifice. The hum of the facility was steady and constant, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The refugees worked tirelessly under Simon's direction, learning the basics of the Iron Horizon's systems. Meanwhile, Jax and Amelia took turns patrolling the perimeter. The looming threat of attack made every creak and hiss of the machinery feel like a warning. Jax had positioned himself on a platform overlooking the main chamber, his rifle resting across his lap. From here he could see the refugees gathering around the central pillar of water. They looked calmer, even hopeful. But hope was fragile, and Jax wasn't convinced it would survive what was coming. Amelia climbed the stairs to join him, her pistol holstered but within easy reach. "Anything?" "Not yet," Jax said, his voice low. "But they're out there. I can feel it." She sat beside him, her movements slower than usual. The exhaustion was catching up to everyone. "Simon thinks he can reroute some of the systems to fortify the gate. It'll buy us time." "How much time?" Jax asked, glancing at her. "Not enough," she admitted, "but it's something." Jax sighed, running a hand over his face. "Something's better than nothing." Amelia studied him for a moment. "You've been through worse than this, haven't you?" "Yeah," Jax said, his tone flat. "Doesn't mean I want to go through it again." She smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure we don't have to." The attack begins. The warning came just before dawn. Simon's voice crackled over the facility's ancient intercom system. "They're here." Jax was on his feet instantly, his rifle in hand. He took the stairs two at a time, meeting Amelia at the entrance to the main chamber. Lucas stood nearby, his machete drawn, his hands trembling. "Stay with Simon," Jax told the boy. "Help him keep the systems running." Lucas nodded reluctantly, retreating toward the control console. Amelia turned to Jax, her expression tense. "What's the plan?" "Hold them at the gate," Jax said. "We can't let them breach the inner chambers. If they get to the water, it's over." They hurried to the gate, where Simon had already rerouted power to reinforce the locking mechanisms. The steel door hummed with energy, but Jax knew it wouldn't hold forever. Outside, the sound of engines roared, accompanied by the sharp crack of gunfire. The raiders were making their move. The first wave came hard and fast. Explosions shook the ground as the raiders deployed makeshift battering rams against the gate. Jax and Amelia took up positions near the control room, firing through narrow slits in the wall. Every shot had to count. "They're testing the defenses," Jax said, firing at a raider who ventured too close. "This is just the warm-up." Amelia reloaded her pistol, her jaw set. "Then let's make them think twice." The gate shuddered again, the metal groaning under the strain. Jax cursed under his breath. "Simon, how's that override coming?" Simon's voice crackled over the intercom. "I'm redirecting power to the secondary defenses, but I'll need more time." "Work faster!" Jax shouted. A desperate gamble. The second wave hit harder. The raiders brought heavy weapons, firing grenades that rocked the gate and sent debris flying. Jax ducked as a piece of shrapnel zipped past his head, slamming into the wall behind him. "They're gonna breach!" Amelia yelled. Jax scanned the area, his mind racing. "We need to slow them down. There's a maintenance shaft that leads to the outer perimeter. I can use it to flank them." "That's suicide," Amelia said. "You'll be out in the open." "I'm not planning to stick around for tea," Jax said. "Just keep the rest of them busy." Amelia grabbed his arm before he could leave. "Jax, don't get yourself killed." He smirked. "I'll do my best." Jax's flank. The maintenance shaft was cramped and dark, its walls slick with condensation. Jax crawled through it quickly, his rifle strapped to his back. When he emerged outside, the morning sun was harsh and blinding. He shielded his eyes, taking in the scene. The raiders had set up a crude siege line, their trucks bristling with weapons. A group of them worked furiously at the gate, while others kept up a relentless barrage of gunfire. Jax moved silently, his boots crunching against the gravel as he circled around their position. He took the first raider by surprise, a quick burst from his rifle dropping the man before he could shout. The second raider turned, his face contorted in shock, but Jax didn't give him time to react. 2 shots, clean and efficient. The element of surprise didn't last. One of the raiders spotted him, shouting to the others. Jax dove for cover as bullets tore through the air around him. The turning point. Inside the facility, the gate began to buckle. Simon's voice crackled over the intercom. "I'm rerouting everything I've got, but it won't hold much longer." Amelia fired through the slits, her aim steady despite the chaos. Lucas stood beside her, his machete at the ready. "What do we do if they get through?" he asked. "We don't let them," Amelia said, her voice firm. Outside, Jax fought like a man possessed. He used the terrain to his advantage, ducking and weaving through the raiders' lines. But he was running out of ammo, and the raiders kept coming. Then he saw it, their command truck, parked just behind the main assault. If he could take it out, it might scatter the raiders long enough for the others to regroup. Jax sprinted toward the truck, bullets kicking up dust around his feet. He reached it just as a raider stepped into his path. They grappled, Jax slamming the man into the side of the truck before driving his knife into his chest. He climbed into the cab, yanking at the controls. The truck's engine roared to life, and Jax slammed it into gear. He aimed it straight for the gate, jumping clear at the last second. The truck barreled forward, its momentum carrying it into the raiders' line, scattering them like pins. The explosion rocked the battlefield, sending fire and debris into the air. The remaining raiders hesitated, their confidence shaken. Sacrifice. Back inside, Simon's voice came over the intercom, weak but determined. "I've activated the purge system. It'll flood the outer chambers and seal the inner sanctum." "What about you?" Amelia shouted. Simon didn't answer. In the control room, he sat slumped over the console, his hand resting on the final switch. "It has to be done," he whispered. Victory. The flood came quickly, a wall of water rushing through the facility's outer corridors. The remaining raiders were swept away, their screams drowned by the roar of the deluge. Inside the sanctum, the refugees huddled together, the sound of the water fading into silence. Jax stumbled back through the maintenance shaft, soaked and battered but alive. He collapsed against the wall, his breath ragged. Amelia knelt beside him, her face a mix of relief and grief. "Simon?" Jax shook his head. "He saved us." Lucas approached, his machete still clutched in his hand. "What now?" Jax looked at the refugees, then at the towering pillar of water. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. Now, we live. The Iron Horizon was theirs, but the cost of survival would never be forgotten. Chapter 10. A New Dawn. The refugees stood in silence, staring at the now sealed outer corridors. The roar of the purge system had subsided, leaving the inner sanctum eerily quiet. Water dripped from the edges of the chamber, pooling around their feet, a reminder of the price they'd paid to keep the Iron Horizon secure. Jax leaned against a steel pillar, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his body battered but unbroken. He watched the group, his sharp eyes scanning for signs of panic or despair. They had survived, but survival wasn't enough, not anymore. "We made it," Lucas said, his voice small but hopeful. The boy still clutched his machete, though it hung loosely at his side now. Jax nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, kid, we made it." Amelia stepped forward, her clothes soaked and her hair plastered to her face. She looked at Jax, her expression somewhere between exhaustion and gratitude. "We're safe, but what now?" The remaining refugees gathered in the center of the chamber, the water pillar casting rippling reflections on their tired faces. Jax stood at the front, his presence commanding despite his reluctance to lead. "First things first," he said, his voice steady. "We take stock of what we've got. Food, water, tools, everything. We ration carefully and make it last." Amelia nodded, taking notes on a scavenged tablet they'd found in the facility. "I'll organize teams. Some people can help with inventory. Others can start repairing what's damaged." "What about defenses?" one of the refugees asked, his voice edged with fear. "The raiders know we're here. They'll come back." "They won't," Jax said firmly. "Not for a while, at least. Simon's purge system took out their main force, and without that beacon broadcasting, they won't find us again easily." He paused, glancing at the steel walls around them. "But that doesn't mean we relax. We reinforce the gate, secure the perimeter, and prepare for anything." Exploring the facility. In the days that followed, the group focused on settling in. The Iron Horizon's inner sanctum turned out to be more than just a water reservoir. Amelia and Lucas led a team to map the facility, uncovering hidden storerooms filled with supplies, freeze-dried food, medical kits, and tools left behind by its original designers. Jax spent his time training a small group of volunteers to handle weapons. Most of the refugees were farmers, traders, or laborers, unaccustomed to fighting. But under Jax's tutelage, they began to grow confident, even determined. "You're getting better," Jax said to Lucas one evening after a sparring session. The boy had taken to the machete with surprising skill, his strikes sharp and deliberate. "Thanks," Lucas said, wiping sweat from his brow. "I just don't want to be afraid anymore." Jax nodded, clapping him on the shoulder. "Fear's not a bad thing, kid. It keeps you sharp. Just don't let it stop you." A memorial for Simon. One of the first things the group did was erect a small memorial for Simon near the water pillar. They used a piece of steel from the broken gate, carving his name into it with makeshift tools. Amelia spoke as the group gathered around. "Simon believed in this place. He believed it could save us, and he gave his life to make that belief a reality. We owe him everything." Jax stayed at the back, his arms crossed. He didn't speak, but he didn't have to. The group's survival was Simon's legacy, and Jax intended to honor it by keeping them alive. As days turned into weeks, the Iron Horizon began to feel less like a refuge and more like a home. The group repaired damaged systems, cultivated small hydroponic gardens, and even began planning for the future. The constant fear of raiders diminished, replaced by cautious optimism. But Jax couldn't shake the feeling that it was all temporary. He spent his nights patrolling the perimeter, his rifle always within reach. The Iron Horizon was secure for now, but the world outside hadn't changed. It was still ruthless, still broken, and sooner or later, it would come knocking. A warning. One evening as Jax walked the perimeter, he spotted something in the distance, a glint of metal reflecting the setting sun. He froze, raising his rifle and scanning the horizon. It could have been debris, a harmless remnant of the old world, but it could also have been a scouting party. He returned to the main chamber, where Amelia was organizing supplies. "We've got movement on the horizon," he said. "Could be nothing. Could be trouble." Her face tightened, but she nodded. "We'll be ready." The final scene. The refugees gathered around the central chamber as Jax addressed them. The glow of the water pillar lit his face, making his scars and weariness look almost noble. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice carrying through the room. "We've fought, we've lost people, but we're still here. And as long as we're here, we keep fighting, not just to survive, but to build something better." The group murmured in agreement, their faces a mix of determination and hope. Amelia stepped forward. "And we'll do it together." Jax nodded, his gaze lingering on the group. For the first time he felt a glimmer of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Faith, not in God, not in the world, but in these people. He turned to the horizon visible through the facility's reinforced observation window. The world was still harsh, still dangerous, but the iron horizon stood strong, a symbol of what could be rebuilt from the ashes. Jax tightened his grip on his rifle and whispered under his breath, "Let them come." The iron horizon was more than a fortress. It was a new beginning.
We hope you have enjoyed this story. If you have, please share this audiobook with a friend. Your friend will appreciate it, and the Gigabizzle Bupenheimers of the algorithm will like it too.